Hello and welcome back to Particularpixels. I'm Xiaoling, and in this What Is video, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Overwatch. So for those of you who don't know what it is, it's Blizzard's upcoming first-person team-based shooter. The game is currently in closed beta, and they have not yet announced any release date. So a lot of people have compared Overwatch to Team Fortress 2, but even though there are some similarities to both games, there are some significant differences as well, which I'll cover a little bit later in the video. But I want to start off talking a little bit about the story and the setting of the game itself. So as you may have noticed, the intro before I started talking is essentially the story of the game. But for those of you who want a quick recap, the game is a unique IP. It's a new IP that Blizzard has created. It's not set in any of the other game universes. The setting is an alternate Earth 60 years in the future. So 30 years prior to the events of the game, robots had taken over the Earth. Overwatch was formed to defeat the robots, and after its formation it was disbanded because it was no longer needed, and the world since then has become a much darker place. So they've gone on to say that the game's overall narrative will be fleshed out by the material outside of the game itself. The cinematic trailer was the first example that they used. Now guys, for those of you who haven't seen the cinematic trailer, I've put the link in the description below. Do yourself a favor, watch the trailer. It's really good, as you would expect with Blizzard's cinematics. Then they went on to say that in-universe tweets was another way they would flesh out the story. News articles, origin movies, and character articles. They've also said that the environments of the maps themselves are intended to provide players with insight into the game's setting. And finally, they said that they intend to flesh out the lore of Overwatch to the point where it stands on par with Diablo, StarCraft, and World of Warcraft settings. So the first thing I'm going to say is that the game won't contain any single player campaign. Blizzard have said that it's going to be a multiplayer only game, and they wanted to focus on team play rather than individual kills, and they wanted to focus on heroes rather than squads. So there are currently 18 heroes in the game at the moment. Almost certainly more will be added as the game progresses further toward its release date. And of these 18 heroes, they're all divided into categories. So you've got your offensive heroes, you've got your defensive heroes, you have your tanks, and you have your support heroes. Very much like you'd expect to find in MOBAs, for example. And each of these heroes have a group of skills that they can use to help them perform their roles better. And these heroes are all significantly different from one another. So I think for players coming from games where every class feels the same, the asymmetry in Overwatch might be a bit daunting at first, but it's something that you can easily learn. It's just a matter of playing with each hero, getting used to the hero, and getting used to how to use the abilities, and also when to use the abilities to be most effective. Even something as simple as moving around the level is different with the heroes. For example, Hanzo can run up walls, Pharah spends a lot of time in the air because she has a jetpack, whereas other characters like Tracer, she blinks around, so trying to get around behind the enemies is a very effective strategy. So knowing the levels, knowing where you can climb, knowing where the good vantage points are is something that changes depending on the hero you play. So you get to see the levels from an entirely different perspective with each hero that you play. It adds a lot to the replayability of the game and also to the strategy. Another interesting feature in the game is the ability to switch heroes when you die. This basically helps you to complement your team better with a different choice of hero, or to counter an enemy team composition. So this feature is very nice. It adds another layer of strategy into the game, and I'm curious to see what kind of team compositions people are going to come up with throughout the course of the beta. I won't be talking about the heroes and their backstories or their abilities in this video. I'll be making another series of videos where I look in depth at each of the heroes that exist in the game and talk a little bit about them. Okay, so let's take a look at the UI layout of the game in general. I wanted to do this because when we get into the map section, at least when you're watching the game footage, you'll have an idea of what you're actually seeing, what all these numbers mean. As I said earlier, this is not going to be a look at the actual abilities themselves. but this is really just to show you where things are on the screen and what those things mean. So starting at the top, we have the timer, which shows you how much time is left to defend your objective or capture your objective respectively. In the event of payload missions, it's the amount of time to get the payload to the checkpoint. The sections to the left of the timer I'll speak about when we get to the specific map modes. It just makes more sense to talk about them in the confines of the actual modes themselves. Then in the bottom left hand corner of the map you have the character portrait, you have your current health out of the maximum total, and below that you have the on fire bar. This fills up as you do damage to enemies. If you capture objectives, if you defend objectives, if you assist in kills, or if you heal, all these kinds of actions give you essentially flame points, and these points begin to fill up in the bar. When the bar reaches the maximum, your character portrait starts to have this blue fire around it, just showing that you're on fire. The way the bar works is it fills up so long as you're constantly getting these flame points. As soon as you are out of combat for a while, or you're not doing anything for a while, this bar starts to go down again. The only way to keep it full is to be doing something. In the bottom center we have the ultimate ability percentage counter. It shows you how much you still need to get to be able to use your ult. Once it gets to 100%, obviously your Q ability becomes available. And this gets filled from either taking damage or doing damage. To the right of that, we have the shift ability. Then we have the E ability to the right of that. And then it also shows you which weapon you're currently using and how much ammo you have in that weapon. So in the beta there are currently 3 game modes: Payload, Point Capture, and the third mode is essentially a hybrid of the two. So the first of these modes is Payload. There are currently 2 maps available for this. There's Watchpoint Gibraltar and Dorado. So in this mode, it's the attacker's job to escort the payload to the end of the map. If the attackers manage to get the payload to a checkpoint, they'll get more time. And if they manage to get it to the end of the map before the time runs out, they win the match. To the left of the mission timer is the payload progress bar. It indicates the progress of the payload and how far left it has to go before reaching the end of the map. Above that is the payload and multiplier. Basically, the more attackers there are standing next to the payload, the faster it is going to go. So you can gauge that by looking at how high the multiplier is. If there aren't any attackers standing next to it and there are more defenders standing next to the payload, in fact it can actually start going backwards as well. Also, I mentioned earlier in the video that there are checkpoints, so once the payload gets to certain parts of the map, the timer increases again. It would have been nice to have the checkpoints actually displayed on the progress bar as well, so you had an idea of how close or far you were from the next available checkpoint. I'm sure that that's going to be rectified. It just makes sense for them to include that information in the UI display. The next mode is Point Capture. There are currently 3 maps available for this mode. We have the Temple of Anubis, Hadmura, and Volskaya Industries. In this mode, it's the attacker's job to capture both points before the time runs out. They must capture point A before being allowed to move on to point B. And like the payload escort missions, if they capture point A, they get more time. And if they capture both points before the time runs out, they win the match. To the left of the timer are the points captured. They're listed as A and B. If you successfully captured or defended a point, it will be marked with a tick. If you fail to do so, it will be marked with an X. To capture a point, it requires that there are no enemies standing on the point, firstly. And it will also display the amount of time left in the capture process, as well as the amount of teammates that are currently standing on the point. And moving on to the final mode available in the game, is essentially a hybrid between payload and point capture. The attackers have to capture a point first, which then unlocks the payload, and then they can escort it to the end of the map. And again, the same rules apply. If they don't manage to either capture the point in the beginning or get the payload to the final objective, they lose the match. And that pretty much covers the maps that are currently available in the beta. Obviously, there are going to be more maps and content released as the game progresses further forward, perhaps even some new game modes. With regards to the pricing of the game, Blizzard hasn't actually announced what the business model is going to be, so we're going to have to wait and see. From what I understand, there is going to be a cash shop, but purely for cosmetic items. They've also mentioned that there is going to be a progression system in the game. They haven't given a whole lot of information about that, so we're just going to have to wait until they reveal more information about both the pricing models and the progression system. They've also released the system specifications, so I'll put them up on the screen for you guys to see in case you are interested as well. I hope this video was helpful to some of you at least with regards to the content. If you guys are interested in getting access to the beta, or at least interested in having a chance to receive invitations, you can check out my beta video where I speak about that and how you can go about doing that. Otherwise, if you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the section below. I've been Xiaoling, and I'll see you next time.